Hello, everyone. My name is Kate Weaver. I'm an Associate Professor and Associate Dean of Students here at the LBJ School. We'd like to welcome you to our webinar, specifically designed for those of you who have been serving or have served in the military. First, I want to thank you for your service and let you know that we have a particular commitment to working with those who have served in the military. We feel that you already have embodied all the passion and commitment of providing public service to your country. And therefore, you're the perfect fit for pursuing graduate studies in public policy. And so we're making a special outreach this year in hopes that we can entice some of you to the LBJ School. So here today I have with me 4 of our current students. One's online. We have 3 here present. So we have Brandon, Nathan, Dave, and Chris online. So I'm going to let them first introduce themselves and tell you all a bit about their background. Then I'll tell you a bit about the LBJ programs, and then we'll open it up for discussion. Brandon?
My name is Brandon Potterville. I'm an active duty captain. I commissioned from West Point in 2011, and I am actually here at LBJ getting ready to go back to teach at West Point following graduation.
Nathan Bumagny. I'm a first-year global policy student here. I was in the Army National Guard, and I'm here to hopefully prepare myself to go back into it.
My name is David Nealon. I was in the Marine Corps from 2002 to 2007. I worked in the defense technology industry for about 5-6 years after that. And I'm a second-year global policy candidate here at the LBJ School, and my focus is in national security and cybersecurity.
And Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, my name's Chris Piskai. I'm an Army active duty lieutenant colonel. I'm a second-year global policy student, and I'm attending school through the Army the civil schooling program. So I am still active duty, and I will go back to regular active duty service following graduation in May.
Wonderful. Thanks, Chris. So a bit about our program. The LBJ School has 2 regular degree programs, a DC concentration, an executive master's in public leadership, and a PhD program. The 2 main master's programs are the Master's in Public Affairs and, of course, the Master's in Global Policy Studies, which I didn't realize our entire panel today was all from global policy. Okay, good. Brandon's empath. I forget because he's in my classes. But so the empath and the MGPS degrees are your standard 2-year master's degrees. The empath focuses a lot on, well, not necessarily domestic affairs, but the policies and processes and politics of working in public policy at the local, the state, the national level, and to some extent the international level. The GPS degree was created about 10 years ago, specifically focused on careers that would place students into international global public policy positions. So that program focuses a lot more on sort of the policies and practices at the supranational level, U.S. foreign policy, comparative foreign policy, with specializations in areas such as national security, energy and environment, international development, global economic governance, finance, trade, and so forth. empath, on the other hand, has a great deal of focus and specialization on social policy, education, healthcare, transportation, public management, public financial management. Am I forgetting anything, Brandon? Right. So we have 2 excellent 2-year master's programs. We also have a DC concentration, which for both empath and the GPS program. And the DC concentration is a very special program designed for those of you who might want to immediately enter the DC policy arena after graduate school. So it's a program really designed to get students completely immersed in how policy works in DC, particularly at the legislative level. In that program, you spend 2 semesters here in Austin, enjoying the fabulous weather and the tacos, taking core classes, and then you move to DC, and you take 6 months of part-time classwork and a 32-hour-a-week professional apprenticeship that is designed to help you immediately enter the workforce upon graduation. That is an 18-month program. Our executive master's program is a year-long program. I'm happy to answer questions on that later. And then our PhD program, of course, is however long you make it. So that's a different beast entirely. Now, what we've done, particularly for active duty military officers, is we've designed options to do a master's degree in 18 months or 2 years, depending on what your educational deployment looks like, or a PhD in 3 years, which is usually the allotment of time you have to do a PhD. And so we've had many students rotate through that. Chris and Brandon are examples. Brandon, you've got the 2 years.
Yes.
Chris, do you have the 18-month or the 2-year version?
The basis of the program is supposed to be 18 months for me, but I asked for an exception to policy to do 2 years because it aligns better with my move schedule. So I'm also doing the full 2-year program.
And you can't leave the tacos. Can't forget the tacos, right? So, but we have all kinds of flexibility for active duty to enable you to use whatever educational employment you have available to you. So we can create a more intense 18-month program to get you done in time. For PhD students, we have actually had people do all their coursework, comprehensive exams, and the PhD writing in 3 years. I swear to God, only a military officer can do this, the discipline that it takes. And for many of our veterans, Texas is a particularly great place to go if you're a veteran, because not only can you tap into a GI Bill, but you can tap into something called the Hazelwood Act, which, are any of you on the Hazelwood Act right now?
I used it for my undergrad.
Okay, do you want to talk a bit about that?
Sure. So if you enlisted into service from Texas, then you're eligible to use the Hazelwood Act. And what that does is it waives tuition at public institutions. So I actually funded my entire undergraduate study here at the University of Texas through Hazelwood. And then I combined it with a reserve GI Bill for a living stipend.
Excellent. Dave, did you have it or not?
No, I wasn't a Texas resident. I was in
Oh,
the military, so I'm not eligible.
Yes. But of course, there are all kinds of ways to use the GI Bill and other veterans benefits. Texas is great because unlike other public policy schools, our in-state tuition levels and fees are a little less than $12,000 a year. That is an enormous bargain compared to other public policy schools. And even our out-of-state tuition at around $22,000 is a huge bargain compared to some of those schools on the East Coast that we won't name. So it's a great place to be. Texas, of course, is home to the largest number of veterans per capita of any other state in the United States. So I also think we've got a culture that is particularly friendly to veterans, at least I hope so. And I'll let the 4 of our colleagues here comment on that. So that's a very, very quick overview of our programs. I'd also like to say a few things about everything else that comes with the LBJ experience. Number 1 is UT itself. As the 3rd largest public university, as a graduate student, you would have the opportunity to take courses throughout the entire university. So Nathan, you're doing a dual degree, correct?
I'm applying to do one, but yes.
Still get in for sure.
Middle Eastern studies.
Middle Eastern studies. Dave, you did Arabic here, didn't you?
No, my language specialty was German. I did international
German, right.
relations and government.
Okay, right. But generally at UT, when you do your MPath or MGPS degree, you get to take electives or specialization courses throughout the university. So if you're interested in doing more work in government, history, law, business, public health, even right now, we're starting to look at options at the Dell Medical School. There are opportunities for you to take advantage of everything that UT has to offer. We also have our research centers. And particularly for this crowd, I would say that our centers oriented around national and international security are a big draw. So we have the Strauss Center for International Security and Law, the Clement Center for National Security, and a research lab called Innovations for Peace and Development that focuses on conflict, peace, and development. And I think everyone is involved in some way with at least one of those centers. So do you want to talk about how the centers play into your experience here at LBJ? And how you've been able to get involved in research or other professional development through those arms?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I'm involved with Innovations for Peace and Development. And what's unique is I think I'm probably one of the first veterans to get significantly involved with the group. So they do a lot of conflict research and having that firsthand experience in those environments. I've been able to provide my perspectives to an audience of undergrads and graduate students who are pretty eager to learn from my experiences. And so I've sat in some meetings. They'll be researching, for example, there's a one where we're studying things we're doing in Colombia to try to promote peace, especially post-FARC. And I'm able to go in there and have a perspective that's a little bit unique and provide some value added to that group as they pursue it.
I'm involved with the Clement Center and the Strauss Centers. They're both centers focused on national security. I'm a Chancellor Scholar, so it means my funding is through those centers. That also means that I have the opportunity to meet some of the speakers that come to UT, which is a fantastic opportunity. On top of that, a lot of the folks that are involved with those centers as professors, they're ex-policymakers. So you hear firsthand information, firsthand experiences from folks that have done the things that many of us aspire to do.
I'm also involved with both the Strauss Center and Clements Center. As an undergraduate, I was involved with the Clements Center, and now I'm more heavily involved with the Strauss Center. I'm working on a research project with Matt Tate, who's well known in the cybersecurity world on industrial control systems and SCADA networks and the vulnerabilities. But in addition to, or similar to Nate, I'm also a Chancellor Scholar. Along with that, we get the opportunity to meet senior policymakers and congressmen, senators from DC that come here for speaking engagements. Every year, the University of Texas and Clements and Strauss host the Texas National Security Forum, which is coming up on November 30th. So the opportunity to stay connected to the national security community is first rate.
I want to actually mention some of the speakers that have come through for both just normal events at the Strauss and Clements Center, which never seemed quite normal to me, and the National Security Forum, which is a really top-notch event.
I've personally had the opportunity to interact either individually or in a small group setting with the former director of the CIA, John Brennan, on numerous occasions, former FBI Director Jim Comey, Deputy Director of the NSA, George Barnes, Senator Cornyn, numerous undersecretaries of defense, undersecretaries of state, and several prominent individuals from multiple other agencies.
In addition to that, you get the opportunity to meet with folks that work at prominent think tanks like Brookings. General Allen came here a few weeks ago, so got to chat with him a little bit.
But the only one I can think of to add to that right now is Congressman Castro came 2 weeks ago,
Yep.
and he spoke to us about his perspectives on the role of lawmakers in the intelligence process.
Right. And that's just related to the security realm. Obviously, LBJ is much broader than that. I think over the last 3 weeks, we've also had Jerry Brown, governor of California, Hillary Rodham Clinton,
That's right.
and George Mitchell, who was absolutely amazing, on the 20th anniversary of the Good Friday Accords. That was quite remarkable. So lots of opportunities to really act with the policymakers and practitioners at all levels and get directly involved in research. Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. It's really just that, my takeaway when I was applying was, at some point I had this realization that, when the alternative is considering East Coast schools, LBJ draws a lot of talent. And so I'm constantly pleasantly surprised to see, the different personalities and senior policymakers that come through. And because we are relatively small, that you have the opportunity to actually interact with those folks, which I think is a big positive for being here in Texas.
Yeah, and I would add to that, the LBJ School is a bit unique in the sense that our PhD program is very small. And so our master's students really get a lot of attention and the kinds of opportunities that they normally wouldn't at other schools where you're with 500 other master's students and all the PhD students are getting the prime research slots, etc. And so here it's really great to be able to come in as a first-year master's student and immediately get involved with these conversations, with this kind of research, with these networks, quite honestly. And we like this kind of culture. So on that note, I'm going to encourage you all to actually post questions in the chat box. And while you're thinking of your questions, I'm going to go one more round with our panel and ask them if they could comment on some aspect of the LBJ or UT culture or the experience that attracted you to the LBJ school or that you found particularly useful, enjoyable, whatever adjective you want to use.
I'll start. So one of the things that has really struck me in the time that I've been here at LBJ is the emphasis on soft skills and being able to translate those soft skills into marketing yourself. I think that's something that veterans maybe have a distinct advantage in. the ability to communicate clearly and effectively, time management, discipline, all of those things that employers are looking for that veterans already have a leg up on traditional college students. I think there's a big emphasis here at LBJ putting those into practice and developing those skills. And I think that's one of the things that has impressed me the most and made the most impact.
Thanks.
As Dr. Weaver mentioned earlier, there's several centers that are focused on different things besides national security. So as a first-year graduate student, you take courses with folks that are interested in all sorts of fields, whether it's democracy spreading, economic development, etc. And I think one of the greatest things about LBJ is that you interact with other students who may have interests that are far different from yours, but it still enriches your education because you hear about issues and certain topics that you've thought about one way, maybe through a national security lens, if that's what you're interested in, and that's what your experience is in. But you hear it from another perspective, and I think that's tremendously beneficial, especially for us that want to be future policymakers. It's really important to hear different perspectives from all sides of the tables, from everyone who's going to be affected by policies that we craft.
So if I describe LBJ in one word, it's impact to me. And I guess what I mean by that is, as a student here, I'm in Dr. Weaver's class, and literally the first week we were here, we had a chance to make an impact. So I've been studying the food security and how it relates to national security, so looking at conflict in those two. And we're actually working for a client. So that first week, I've really been able to jump in and make an impact. But there's also a huge resource in the faculty that's been in the real policy arena making an impact. So I'm taking a class with Admiral McRaven next semester where he's going to basically give us a crash course on how to be in the Pentagon or how to be in the White House. But so there's just there's former Congress people on the faculty, former members of the different various three-letter agencies. So just the impact that the policy practitioners have had here at LBJ is a great resource. And then finally, LBJ wants to continue making an impact, and you see that just in the hunger for the program to continue to improve. The dean, she mentioned that during our orientation, was they're not resting on their laurels, they're continuing to improve the program. And I saw in there a lot of the skills that I want to develop in myself, kind of as shared values with LBJ. And so for those three reasons, I think impact is how I would sum up LBJ for myself.
Great, thanks. Chris, do you want to add anything?
Sure, just to echo a little bit of what Brandon talked about, with the soft skill development. So being a little bit different than some of the other traditional students, I'm a bit further along in my career. So from the perspective of being 16 years deep, the skills that I look for are a little bit different, and I find that the types of interactions I have at LBJ are particularly helpful. So I find that I don't seek out things like I'm not necessarily looking to learn a new system, but the opportunity to sit down and have an engaged conversation with professors and some of the senior leaders that come through. Which, by the way, I was surprised that so many of the professors were senior leaders, in the government before coming. It seems like a new one turns up every day, where you discover that so and so is a 4-star general equivalent, in the civilian service, and just the guy that you've been seeing getting coffee every day.
Yeah.
But so that level of interaction and the ability to find maybe not necessarily mentors, but people that understand where I am in my career, and that I need something a little bit different than finding that initial direction, but maybe shaping, what I want to create or where I want to be a little bit further down the road, I find very helpful.
Where did it go? I just lost the screen. Gwen, if you can come bail me out, and hopefully we're still in the meeting. I think I just lost the screen for a second.
You are still in the meeting. We don't currently have any questions at this particular moment in time.
Okay. I just managed to click my way out of actually seeing the chat box. So if you can help me navigate my way back, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I will come on in there in just a second.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Of course.
We're finally to an operation, right? And you in logistics. Everyone asks. But I guess I have one more question for you. A question I often get from prospective students who are currently serving the military or are veterans. And they ask if we're friendly towards the military. And it's difficult for me. I've had plenty of relatives in the military, but I am myself not served. And so I have difficulty answering that question. So I was wondering if maybe you could comment on that. Just very, very honestly.
So I can actually speak directly to that.
I'm sorry, could you just restate that one more time? I missed you for a second.
That was Chris asking you to repeat the question.
Oh,
Maybe you can just repeat the question.
Yeah, it's a question I get from prospective students quite often is the LBJ school military friendly?
So I was nervous about that when I first came. Just, what are the preconceived notions people are going to have about me being a veteran? And, you think of like the Keep Austin Weird vibe. And I really didn't know what I was walking into, but I've been very pleasantly surprised with maybe at a minimum it's acceptance, but I think it's really an embracing of our experiences. I've actually sat down and talked to a guy who leans, socialist, and we just don't see eye to eye on about anything in politics, but we both had a really good conversation. I think we both came away with a different perspective from it. So definitely at a minimum respectful, but I do think it's a positive relationship, and our status as veterans has been something that's contributed to the
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, good. I'd like to echo what Brandon said, that I've only been here for a few months, my first year, but in every class, whenever I offer an experience or something that relates to the class from being a veteran, it's always been accepted. It's a valued opinion. And I think especially with regards to the national security centered courses, it's really important to have veterans give their voices to impact the policies and to help educate some of the future policymakers that are going to create policies that are going to affect future service members and veterans.
Is the LBJ school veteran friendly? Overwhelmingly, yes. And I say that for two reasons. Number one, the faculty and staff. I've had nothing but positive experiences with all of the faculty and staff that I've interacted with, whether I agree with their policies and their platforms or not. And because of the students. Not all of the students here are traditionally out of undergrad. There's a lot of older returning students here, non-traditional students, but there is a lot of younger students. And across the spectrum, people ask me about my military service. They ask me what it's like to come back to the civilian world, what it feels like to be an older student with a wife and kids. So I've never once felt like I'm out of place or uncomfortable or ostracized because I was in the military.
Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm with Dave on this one. Besides that like 21 Jump Street moment of do I put my backpack on one shoulder or two, trying to figure out if I'm going to look like the old guy when I come to school. I think I'd start in general. Texas, first of all, is very veteran friendly. I'm a little bit different. I commute from San Antonio, and I find both communities to be very friendly. Outside of the university community. Today the presidential library let me have my promotion in the Great Hall in the library, which was a pretty nice favor that they did for me. So even the greater university community embraces it, and like the other guys have said that in class, I've never had the experience that anybody was critical without good reason. Of the military, and certainly not of my service. And I think that it's also important. It's not because they just agree with what we do, but it's because they afford me and my colleagues here that respect, just as peers. And I think that's important to note. Where nobody's ever really made me feel anything but welcome because of my my military service. And if anything, they actually accept some of the feedback I have as somebody a little bit later in my career is being at least reasonably legit. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I know that a lot of students at Innovations for Peace and Development go to Brandon to ask about how to motivate people who are working for them, how to organize things, how to discipline. They get a lot out of his experience. Since we don't have any questions, we have a very quiet audience today. I would just like to ask one more thing, which is, why did you choose to get your public policy degree? And then of all your choices of public policy programs, why LBJ?
So I can start. So obviously it boils down to like what I talked about with the impact idea. When I was talking with West Point, I'm going back to teach. I think I said that earlier. And so they were kind of coaching me on which schools I should look at and what would make me the most prepared, professor when I'm there teaching at West Point. And they all really pointed me at UT and LBJ. So I'm coming from more of a econ quant background. All the core curriculum here is geared towards building that skill set or reinforcing that skill set. And my ability to focus on this. There's a strong development community here at LBJ. There's a strong quant emphasis at LBJ, and there's a strong national security emphasis. So those three together really helped me make this decision easy. And then when I talked to my professors at West Point who've been coaching me about some going to LBJ, they had the counterfactual that I don't have of what other schools are like. And what they talked about is some of the East Coast schools, again, the priority is not embracing the graduate students as much as it is focusing on the PhD. So the level of access that we have here seems to be a comparative advantage about LBJ versus some of those other policy schools. And then just the rigor associated with the curriculum here. That all made it an easy choice for me.
Sure. So I chose to pursue a global policy degree because I had stepped away. I had studied undergrad international relations in Arabic. I had stepped away from that for a year. I was working in an unrelated field in Seattle, but I really felt that drive to come back to public service and to hopefully work for the government again. And so I knew that getting a degree at LBJ or a policy degree period would be a huge step in that direction to prepare me for that type of career. Not to mention you're competing with other folks who have masters and PhDs for the types of positions that I'm interested in. So it's almost like an unofficial requirement to have at least a graduate degree, a master's. And then I chose LBJ because it has such a strong focus on national security, if you want to focus on that. And in addition to that, UT has really good area studies programs. So if you want, you can dual major or have a dual degree with the Latin American Studies program or the Middle Eastern Studies program like me. And that lets you take even more language if you've already taken a language, which language skills are always such a great asset for any career. So I'm really excited about trying to do a dual degree here at LBJ with Middle Eastern Studies.
The reason I came to LBJ was really threefold. First of all, the power of the National Security Network. Like I mentioned, the opportunity to interact with so many senior policymakers and academics and leading scholars in this field is, bar none, you won't find it anywhere else, I don't think. The second is because of my interest in technology, there's no better place to be than Austin. Silicon Valley is busy dumping itself into Austin, Texas. I know because housing prices reflect that. So the convergence of those two networks and what my career goals are, technology and national security, it's a no-brainer. Number three, funding. And regardless of whether I was awarded funding or not, I would have come to the LBJ School because of the first two reasons. But the opportunity to receive a fully funded education is pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And Chris, how about you?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes back to what the guys have mentioned about access as a graduate student. Like I said, for me, so I don't intend to ever be Dr. Piskai. And so that access for me is very important, to develop those skills. And I find that here where, the atmosphere, at least that I interpreted, looking at some of the East Coast schools, was decidedly not the atmosphere that I wanted to study in, particularly because I go back to the military after this. And so some of those ideas about I guess some of the attitudes that lead to behaviors that are not necessarily supportive of your fellow students, I don't find any of that here, and quite frankly, there's no benefit of that for me. So it's not that the UT environment is not competitive, but I think I just got the feeling that it's a little more supportive than some of the other schools that I looked at back on the East Coast, and I appreciate that as well.
I like to describe the LBJ School as an open door, open Rolodex kind of environment. I realize that dates me quite a bit because no one knows what a Rolodex is. But the general idea is that our doors are always open to students. We work very closely with students. We're often on first name basis, which I think is actually quite difficult for those of you from the military. They keep calling me ma'am. And we're Rolodex in the sense that we quite generously share our networks, helping students find internships, job opportunities, other professional development opportunities. And I just don't see that kind of collaborative community elsewhere, which is actually a reason why I chose to come here as a professor. So I definitely think it's an asset of the school. We have a question from Adam. Hi, Adam. In your personal experience, does the national security focus offer enough new information in terms of coursework to incentivize pursuing it as opposed to another of the track's focuses, which maybe offer different skills or perspectives? So sort of like, do you come here to UT to study national security, or if you already have national security in the bag, do you come here for something else?
Do you want to start off?
Sure. Yeah, so I have, I guess, a little bit of an advantage here. There's an area of study about national security that I saw wasn't addressed by the curriculum. So I approached a professor and said, can I do a conference course? And a conference course is an independent study, self-led conference course where you meet with the professor once a week-ish, ideally, and study an area or a topic of your choosing. Pitch it, you sell it, they approve it, and you go for it. So I'm currently working on a project to study how our government was organized and resourced to compete with great powers in cyberspace. So a pretty salient issue, but one that's not in the course catalog, so we made it up. So the flexibility that's offered here with the faculty and staff is pretty.
And amazing that you found someone who could work with you on that topic, which
Absolutely.
means there's a base level of expertise here to work with that's not replicated. On that note, I would actually like to emphasize that indeed we have these major policymakers and practitioners and residents teaching at LBJ. We have a CIA analyst in residence representing that agency. We have a former CIA operative in residence leading our intelligence studies project. Amazingly chatty guy for his career. We have also a diplomat in residence. So this is a former deputy ambassador to China who is serving the state of Texas, but is actually housed here in the LBJ School and provides amazing services to students who are thinking about transitioning into careers with the State Department and Foreign Service, including setting up some really great internships and working with them on State Department placement. And the thing that you all don't have to worry about, but everyone else has to worry about, security clearance. Right? For some of you may have to renew it. So it is really great in that sense that if you can't find it at UT, you can make it.
Absolutely.
And you can do so at the LBJ School or go to law school, business, elsewhere to do so.
Yeah, so I won't repeat what David said. You can find different flavors of national security study to dig deeper into here at LBJ if you want to. The focus here that's most closely related to national security, law, and diplomacy. So within that, you have a wide menu of courses that you can take, whether they're here at LBJ or at the law school or elsewhere at UT. And then in addition to that, you could do graduate portfolio programs, and so those are it shows up on your transcript, kind of like a graduate minor, and those include those I can't even name them all. They're in a variety of
Conflict
fields.
management,
Yeah.
security, and a new one you'd be interested in. And they did his dual degree with Middle Eastern Studies, or going to be. But we also are introducing next year a graduate portfolio certificate in Middle Eastern Studies. So it allows you to get all the regional depth without doing the full second master's degree.
And then I would add to that, there's also a few more quant-focused ones if you want to develop those quant skills. I think it's called applied statistical modeling. And I didn't realize how much quant skills I lacked before I came to LBJ. So it's definitely something to think about if you want to expand that skill set.
So to answer the direct question, I do think that the national security courses have offered me new information. I took one on how the DoD is organized this semester, and obviously as a captain, I've gotten the company level view and a little bit beyond that. But we're taking a class. Chris is actually in the same class as I am, and we're taking a class from a Deputy Secretary of Defense, so we definitely don't have his perspective. So there's obviously new information in terms of security, but also there's that intangible of having a FaceTime with a former senior defense official that isn't necessarily on the syllabus, but it is certainly valuable to our personal development. If it is a concern for you, I've gone to several professors who just asked for a copy of their syllabus prior to making course selections, just so I can take a look and see if it's something I'm interested in. And I've never been told no when I've requested a syllabus. So.
In fact, we actually do post them ahead of the semesters, at least in most cases. Yeah, and Adam, of course, since you're here at UT, we strongly encourage you to come over and visit, sit in on classes, meet these guys in person, and so forth. Chris, did you have anything on that front?
I think really the point I'd just like to make is what Dave brought up is if you don't find exactly what you want, you can make it. There are a lot of resources here, and if you have some sort of grounding or at least undergrad experience in national security, that the talent teaching here can really make those connections for you. Not in terms of they're going to guarantee you a job, but they can help you figure out what direction it is that you're going, because there's enough folks that have been there and done that and have that recent relevant experience. So it's not just a bunch of old folks who left the business 20 years ago and have been academics ever since. There's plenty of professors rather that have recent and relevant experience that I found very helpful. But I also have to run after this. But yeah, if there's ever any time to meet with anyone, please just let me know and I'll make myself available.
Thanks so much, Chris. And once again, congratulations on your promotion.
Thank you. All right, I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Great. So on that, I'll actually tell you a bit about the application process. We've actually extended the deadline for the first round to December 15th. This is to allow people to get those letters of recommendation in, GRE scores, which are unfortunately required, and so forth. So you've got a little extra time to think about that. December 15th is our priority deadline for funding consideration. That doesn't mean you'll be cut out of being considered for a fellowship. If you miss that December 15th deadline, we just review those applications first. So if you can, please try to get in by that deadline. Otherwise, you have all the way until March 15th to apply. And if you're in the Austin area, please by all means come to visit. We have Friday morning prospective student open house to meet with our admissions officers. We can set you up with appointments to meet professors, other students, sit in on classes, come to our events, just to figure out if this is the right place for you. And then finally, the application information is online. If you have any questions at all about the application, what makes her competitive, statement of purpose, if you're worried about your GRE scores, I'll tell you how to deal with that, which is basically don't worry. And any questions about funding opportunities, especially if your GI Bills or Hazelwood Act benefits don't extend all the way through, don't worry, we will absolutely consider you for financial aid and other fellowship offers. So I'd be very happy to talk with you one-on-one. Gwen will provide my email address in the chat box here. Of course, you can also find me on the LBJ website. And I'd be happy to match make with students, alumni, and faculty as you would like. But we really appreciate you joining us today. And if any further questions come up, which I suppose you gentlemen don't mind if someone reaches out to you?
No, of course.
Nope, not at all.
Okay. And thanks so much for joining us. Have a good evening.